The first time my banking app showed a balance with 6 figures in it, I closed the app and opened it again, just to make sure I had read it right. $200,000. I was 29 years old. And the strangest part of that whole moment is that I have never once earned a 6-figure salary in my life. I didn't inherit it, I didn't build some viral business, and I never made a lucky trade on crypto at 3 in the morning. So how does someone on a completely ordinary income quietly save $200,000 before 30? It wasn't one dramatic move. It was 20 small, almost boring habits that I repeated for years until they stopped feeling like sacrifice and started feeling like me. These are the 20 habits that built that number, and the first one is the reason the other 19 even had a chance to work. Let me be honest about the math before we go any further, because the number sounds more impressive than the method. For most of my 20s, I was setting aside somewhere around $1,500 a month. Over roughly 8 years, with my employer adding their piece and the market quietly compounding in the background, that grew into about $200,000. The contributions were mine. The growth was time, doing what time does. And every single dollar I contributed came from the same place, which was habits that freed up money other people were spending without ever noticing it leave. This was never about how much I made, it was about what I kept. To put real shape on it, picture roughly $1,500 going to work every month for about 8 years. That alone is somewhere around $144,000 of contributions. The rest of the gap up to $200,000, that's not me. That's compounding. That's the years quietly stacking returns on top of returns while I went about my life. The contributions came from frugal habits. The growth came from starting early and refusing to touch it. So let's start with the habit that made all of it automatic. Number 1, pay yourself first and never see the money. The way most budgets fall apart is painfully simple. You save whatever happens to be left at the end of the month, and somehow the end of the month always arrives with nothing left. So I flipped the order completely. The day after every paycheck hit my account, an automatic transfer pulled my savings out before I could look at it, before I could talk myself into a weekend that quietly cost $200. The money went into a separate savings account and an investing account that I deliberately made annoying to access. Out of sight, genuinely out of mind. Think about that for a second, because it changes the entire game. You are no longer relying on willpower, which is a muscle that gets tired by Friday. You are relying on a system that already moved the money while you were asleep. The first month felt tight. I won't pretend it didn't. By the third month, I had simply recalibrated to a smaller number in my checking account, and I genuinely never missed what I never saw. This decision seemed small at the time. It wasn't. Every other habit on this list sits directly on top of this one, which is exactly why it's first. Number 2, drive the boring car that's already paid off. Here is a number that should make you a little uncomfortable, because it quietly wrecks more young budgets than almost anything else. As of late 2025, the average monthly payment on a new car in America reached $767, and the average new car now sells for over $50,000. A coworker of mine, I'll call him Marcus, financed a brand new truck the same year we both got hired. Same starting salary as me, give or take. While Marcus was sending $767 a month into a vehicle that started losing value the instant he drove it off the lot, I was driving a used Toyota that I bought outright in cash and then kept for 9 years. That gap, just that one decision, was close to $700 a month I could redirect somewhere useful. Run that money into the market steadily over those years at a normal return, and the amount Marcus spent on the privilege of a new car smell would have grown into a low six-figure sum entirely on its own. He drove a nicer car to work every day. I drove a quieter mind. And here's the detail that makes the new car trap so sticky now. To keep those payments survivable against $50,000 sticker prices, more than 1 in 5 new car loans today stretches to 84 months. 7 full years of payments on something designed to lose value the entire time. Marcus wasn't just paying more per month. He was paying for far longer on a worse deal for an asset quietly working against him. By the time his loan was finally paid off, the truck was worth a fraction of what he'd poured into it, while my boring Toyota had become pure savings with wheels. Number 3, take every dollar of the employer match, no exceptions. If your job offers a retirement match and you're not capturing all of it, you are politely declining a raise. It really is that simple. In 2026, you're allowed to contribute up to $24,500 to a 401k, but you don't need to hit that ceiling to win this particular game. You just need to contribute enough to grab whatever your employer matches, because that match is a guaranteed return you will not find anywhere else in all of finance. When I started, my company matched the first slice of what I put in, dollar for dollar. That's an instant 100% return before the market has even opened for the day. The kind of number that makes accountants cry, in the good way. So I treated that match as the first bill I paid every month, ahead of rent, ahead of groceries, ahead of literally everything. People leave this money sitting untouched on the table every single year, because future them feels like a stranger they'll meet someday. Future you is not a stranger. Future you is real, and future you is quietly begging you to take the free money while it's being handed out. Put a real number on it. Say you earn $50,000 and your employer matches the first few percent you contribute. That can be well over $1,000 free dollars a year that you simply forfeit by not participating. Skip it for a decade, let that decade compound, and you've quietly waved off tens of thousands of dollars that cost you nothing to claim. Nobody would turn down a raise written on paper. Turning down the match is the exact same thing, just harder to see. Number 4, treat every raise like it never happened. This is the habit that separates the people who get ahead from the people sprinting faster on the exact same treadmill. When I got my first real raise, the natural pull was to upgrade something. A nicer apartment, a better phone, dinners out that suddenly felt earned. Instead, I let the raise land in my account, and then I raised my automatic savings transfer by almost the entire amount of it. My lifestyle stayed flat while my income climbed. There's a clinical name for the alternative lifestyle inflation, and it's the reason people earning double what they made 5 years ago still feel strangely broke. They spent the raise before it even cleared. Marcus got the same raise as I did over those years. By 30, his spending had quietly risen to swallow every one of them. He wasn't reckless, and that's the scary part. He just let his costs follow his income around like a shadow that never lets go. I broke that link on purpose, and the surplus went straight to work the same day it appeared. A raise is the easiest money you'll ever redirect because you weren't living on it 5 minutes ago. And the single biggest place that surplus could go to work wasn't my coffee order, and it wasn't even those raises. It was the roof over my head, which is the one expense most people treat as fixed and untouchable. It isn't. And that brings me to the lever that moved more than any other monthly bill in my life. Number 5, anchor your rent and refuse to let it drift upward. Housing is the single biggest lever almost anyone has, and it's also the one people defend the most fiercely. The standard advice says keep housing under 30% of your income. I treated that 30% as a ceiling I wanted to stay comfortably below, not a target to reach for. For a few years, I kept a roommate longer than my friends thought was normal, and when I did live alone, I chose the apartment with the smaller closet and the slightly longer commute, because it cost $300 less every single month. That's $3,600 a year before you count what that money quietly becomes once it's invested instead of handed to a landlord. Now, I could have justified more. Everyone around me was upgrading their space the second a raise cleared, but a bigger apartment doesn't compound. A smaller rent payment, redirected for a decade, absolutely does, and it does it relentlessly. The square footage you brag about today is, more often than not, the retirement you're quietly borrowing against tomorrow. Once I had housing locked down at a number that didn't move for years, the next leak was much smaller per instance, but it ran every single day, sometimes 3 times a day, and it added up faster than almost anyone expects. Number 6, make the cheap meal the default, not the punishment. I want to be very clear here because this one gets misunderstood. This isn't about never enjoying a restaurant again. It's about what happens by default on a normal, exhausted Tuesday when you can't be bothered to think. According to government data, a single sit-down hamburger now runs $16 to $22 in most markets, and once you add a drink and a tip, a casual dinner out for one person quietly clears $30. Do that 4 times a week, and you've spent close to $500 a month feeding yourself food you didn't even particularly want. Stretch that across a full year, and it's roughly $6,000 gone on convenience you barely registered. Invested instead, that one category alone could have been a meaningful slice of my net worth by 30. So my default became a short list of genuinely good, genuinely cheap meals that I could cook half asleep. A pot of something simmering on the stove. Leftovers packed for tomorrow's lunch before I went to bed. A kitchen where almost nothing rots in the back of the fridge unused. Restaurants turned into something I deliberately chose for an occasion, not something I collapsed into out of habit 4 nights a week. That single shift was worth thousands a year, and the honest truth is, I felt better eating it, too. Food was the leak that ran on a schedule. The same predictable drip every day. The next kind of spending was the opposite. It was sudden, it was sharp, and it tended to ambush me on the exact nights I had the least energy to fight back. Number 7, the 2-day rule on anything you merely want. Impulse spending isn't really a money problem, it's a timing problem. The retailer's entire strategy is to collapse the distance between wanting something and owning it down to a single thumb tap, so fast you never get a chance to reconsider. So I deliberately put the friction back in. Anything that wasn't a true need went onto a list, and I forced myself to wait 2 full days before buying it. That's the entire rule. 2 days. What I discovered was almost funny. The wanting nearly always faded on its own. The thing that felt absolutely urgent on Friday night looked faintly ridiculous by Sunday morning. The purchases that survived 2 days were the ones I actually valued, and those I bought without a flicker of guilt. The impulse buys that didn't survive simply stayed in the store where they belonged, and I never thought about them again. You'd be genuinely amazed how much of your spending is just a passing mood wearing the costume of a need. The retailers know this better than you do, which is why one-click buying and buy now pay later exist in the first place. They are friction removers, engineered to get between you and your own second thoughts. The 2-day rule simply puts that friction back where it belongs. And impulse buys, at least, announce themselves loudly. The next kind of spending was far sneakier because it was specifically designed to disappear into the background and never get noticed again. Number 8. Audit the subscriptions quietly bleeding you out. The average American household now juggles several streaming services at once, and that's before you count the gym you visited twice this year, the app you forgot you ever signed up for, and the cloud storage renewing itself silently in the dark. Add it all up, and a typical household burns $60 to $75 a month on subscriptions alone, much of it for things nobody is actually using. So once a quarter, I'd sit down and go line by line through my statement, and I'd cancel anything I hadn't touched in a month. Then I went one step further and started rotating my streaming services instead of stacking them. Subscribe to one, watch everything I wanted, cancel it, move to the next. The exact same content, just sequentially instead of all at once, at a fraction of the total cost. So yeah, the companies are quietly counting on your inertia to keep that money flowing. The fix is simply to stop being inert for 20 minutes 4 times a year. That's the whole ask. Subscriptions drain you in tiny monthly trickles you barely feel. The next habit went after the opposite problem, the big, lumpy, one-time purchases where a single good decision can save you hundreds in one afternoon. Number 9. Buy it used when it loses value the moment you own it. Some things lose most of their value the very instant they leave the store, and for those, buying new is really just paying a tax for the thrill of being first. Furniture, electronics one model behind, exercise equipment, baby gear, hand tools. I bought almost all of it secondhand, in great condition, for a fraction of retail. A desk someone paid $400 for sold to me for $80 because they were moving and didn't want to haul it. A barely ridden bike at half its original price. The previous owner happily ate the depreciation, and I walked away with 90% of the function for 30% of the cost. There's a strange shame people attach to buying used, like it secretly announces you couldn't afford new. Over time, I came to see it the exact opposite way. Paying full price for something that's worth half by next year isn't a flex, and it isn't a sign you've arrived. It's just a slower, more expensive way to stay broke while looking like you didn't. Everything up to this point was about the money I chose to spend on purpose. The next habit was about a different category entirely. The money I never planned to have in the first place. The kind that shows up out of nowhere and quietly tests your discipline the hardest. Number 10. Send every windfall straight past your checking account. Tax refund, work bonus, birthday cash, the unexpected rebate, the side gig payment. The default move is to treat a windfall as permission to spend, a little gift from the universe that somehow doesn't count against the normal rules. I trained myself, almost reflexively, to do the precise opposite. Money I hadn't planned on never touched my checking account long enough to feel real or spendable. It went straight into investments the same day it arrived, before my brain could quietly file it under fun money. Over 8 years, those windfalls added up to a genuinely shocking portion of my total, precisely because I never once let them become something I could spend. The dopamine hit of treating yourself with found money is real, I get it. But found money invested behaves identically to earned money invested, and it compounds exactly the same way over a decade. The universe's little gift, it turns out, is a far better gift when you simply refuse to unwrap it. Now, up to this point, almost every habit has been about one thing: freeing money up so it stops leaking out of your life. The next several are about something different. They're about where all that freed up money actually went, and why the destination matters just as much as the saving. Let's start with the safest dollar of them all. Number 11. Keep your emergency fund somewhere that actually pays you back. For years, people parked their entire safety cushion in a basic savings account earning almost nothing and never questioned it. The FDIC pegs the national average savings rate at about 0.38%, which is a very polite way of saying your bank is using your money for free and thanking you for the privilege. A high-yield savings account, by contrast, is paying somewhere around 4% in 2026, even after the Federal Reserve trimmed rates last year. Same safety, same instant access when you need it, same federal insurance, up to $250,000 per bank. The only real difference is that one of them respects your money and the other one quietly insults it. Put $10,000 in the average account and you might earn around $38 over a year. Put that same $10,000 in a high-yield account near 4% and you earn closer to $400 for doing nothing different at all. Same money, same risk, 10 times the return, just because you opened the right account. So I kept several months of expenses in a high-yield account, earning real interest while it just sat there being my insurance against a disaster. It's not where you get rich, and it was never supposed to be. It's where you make absolutely sure that one bad month never forces you to sell your investments at the worst possible moment. If you've made it this far, and at least one of these has already made you a little uncomfortable, good, that flicker of recognition, that quiet this is literally me feeling in your chest, is the entire point. It means you're exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. The one who wants the honest version instead of a get-rich-quick fantasy. So if that's you, consider subscribing and tell me down in the comments which of these you're actually going to start with. Now, let's get into the habit that did more for my net worth than any single decision I ever made. Number 12. Buy the entire market and then do absolutely nothing. This one is the engine. Everything before it freed up the money. This is where the money actually grew into something. I didn't pick stocks. I didn't chase the hot tip a friend swore was about to 10 times. A guy I knew, let's call him Dave, spent our whole 20s bouncing between meme stocks and crypto coins, completely convinced he was about to time the perfect exit. Some months he was up huge and would not stop talking about it. Most other months, he quietly gave it all back and went silent. Meanwhile, I bought low-cost index funds that hold a tiny slice of essentially the entire market, and then I left them completely, stubbornly alone. The S&P 500 has averaged roughly 10% a year across its history, closer to 7% once you account for inflation. Boring? Completely, but boring, patient compounding beats exciting gambling over a full decade, almost every single time. By 30, Dave had a folder full of dramatic stories and screenshots. I had the balance. The market did all the heavy lifting precisely because I refused to interfere with it, and the hardest part of the whole strategy was learning to sit on my hands and let it. There's an old shortcut called the Rule of 72 that makes this concrete. Divide 72 by your return, and you get the rough number of years it takes your money to double. At the market's long-run average, that's roughly every 7 years, with no extra effort from you at all. Dave was trying to double his money in a weekend, over and over, and mostly failing. I was letting mine double every 7 years, automatically by doing nothing. One of those strategies is exhausting and unreliable. The other one is boring and almost inevitable. Number 13. Fund the Roth while you're still allowed to. A Roth IRA is one of the closest things to a cheat code that ordinary people get handed in their 20s, and a lot of higher earners eventually get locked right out of it without realizing the door was closing. In 2026, you can put in up to $7,500 a year, and eligibility starts phasing out for single filers once income climbs past $153,000. Here's why that timing matters so much. You contribute money you've already paid tax on, then it grows tax-free for decades, and then you withdraw it in retirement completely tax-free. Every dollar of that growth, untouched by the government forever, starting this in my early 20s, while my income was modest enough to qualify without even thinking about it, meant decades of compounding that I will never owe a single cent on. If I had waited until I made more money, like the plan always goes, I'd have risked aging out of the very account that hands you the best deal in the entire tax code. Future, you cannot go back and buy the years you didn't fund it. That window only opens once. The Roth was the headline account, the one most people have at least heard of. The next one is the quiet overachiever that almost nobody uses correctly, and it might be the single most underrated account in the entire system. Number 14. Use the SA as a retirement account wearing a clever disguise. Almost nobody uses a health savings account the way I'm about to describe, and that's exactly why it stays such a quiet advantage. If you're on a high deductible health plan, you can contribute up to $4,400 in 2026. It is the only account in America with a genuine triple tax advantage. The money goes in tax-free, it grows tax-free, and it comes out tax-free when you spend it on medical costs. People tend to treat it like a checking account for doctor visits, draining it as fast as they fill it. I did the exact opposite on purpose. I paid my small medical bills out of pocket when I could, invested the SA money instead, and let it grow like a second secret retirement account. Because here's the part that gets missed. In retirement, healthcare is one of the single largest expenses you will ever face. Estimates put what a single 65-year-old can expect to spend on medical costs across retirement at well over $100,000, and that bill is coming whether you plan for it or not. An SA is the most tax-efficient dollar you can possibly aim straight at it. It was money I already knew I'd need someday, just growing in the most favorable bucket that exists, while everyone else spent theirs at the pharmacy on the way out. Number 15. Never carry a balance. Not once, not ever, not even just this month. The average credit card interest rate in 2026 sits near 21%, and for plenty of cards, it climbs well past 30%. There is no investment on planet Earth that reliably beats that, which means carrying a credit card balance is the mathematical mirror image of everything else on this list. It's still compounding. It's just aimed at your throat instead of your future. I used credit cards constantly for the rewards and the fraud protection and the convenience, but I treated the statement balance exactly like a utility bill, paid in full every month, automatically, with zero exceptions. The moment you start carrying a balance at 21%, the rewards become a cruel little joke, and the bank quietly starts working for itself, using your paycheck as fuel. Nearly a quarter of Americans with card debt say they don't believe they'll ever escape it, and I find that genuinely heartbreaking. Picture a $5,000 balance sitting at 21% while you make minimum payments. You can end up paying well over $1,000 a year in pure interest, money that buys you absolutely nothing and just vanishes into the bank's pocket. That's a vacation a year, lit on fire, every year, for the privilege of having spent money you didn't have. I never let the first dollar of it accumulate because I understood early that the same compounding that built my savings would happily, patiently dismantle them. That was the one place where compounding could turn against me, and avoiding it was non-negotiable. The rest of these final habits are smaller and slower, the kind that are easy to wave off as not worth the bother. That is exactly why they work, and exactly why so few people actually do them. Number 16. Fix it before you replace it. We've all been quietly trained to throw things away the second they hiccup, because replacing feels easier and faster than repairing. But a torn seam, a loose screw, a phone with a dying battery, a squeaky door that drives you up the wall, these are almost never an actual reason to buy a brand new version of the thing. So I learned to do the small repairs myself, the kind that take one short video and 15 minutes. I replaced the battery in a phone for $40 instead of buying a new one for $1,000. I patched clothes, tightened wobbly furniture, and cleaned out appliances so they lasted years longer than they were ever designed to. None of these moments were dramatic, and none of them felt like much on their own. Each one saved a little. But a little, repeated relentlessly across an entire decade and then invested, quietly becomes a number that genuinely surprises you when you finally add it up. The throwaway habit is so expensive precisely because every single instance of it feels far too small to bother noticing. Repairs protected the value of things I already owned. The next habit went after a different target entirely, the money quietly leaving my account on autopilot every month for services I'd stopped questioning years ago. Number 17. Renegotiate your recurring bills once a year. Companies are betting, quite correctly, that you will never actually call them. Your insurance premium creeps up a little at every renewal, hoping you won't look. Your phone bill still includes a plan that was competitive 4 years ago. Your internet provider charges brand new customers less than they charge you for your loyalty, which is a strange way to reward it. So once a year, I'd block out a single afternoon and just go down the entire list. I'd call my car insurance and ask, flatly, what they could do, after shopping one competing quote so I had leverage. I'd call the internet company and casually mention I was thinking about switching, which mysteriously unlocked a lower rate basically every time I tried it. I'd scan the phone plans for something cheaper that did the identical thing. One afternoon of slightly awkward, slightly boring phone calls routinely saved me several $100s a year, sometimes a good deal more. The companies are quietly counting on your discomfort to keep you quiet. Getting comfortable being mildly annoying for an afternoon is one of the highest paying skills in all of personal finance. So far, almost every habit on this list has pointed in the same direction. Spend less, cut more, keep more. The next one is the single exception, and it's the one people get backwards more often than any other. Number 18. Buy quality once for the things you touch every single day. This one sounds like it flatly contradicts everything else I've said, and that tension is exactly the point I want you to sit with. Frugal does not mean cheap. Cheap is buying a $20 pair of shoes 3 separate times in 1 year because they keep falling apart. Frugal is buying one genuinely good pair that lasts 5 years and quietly costs less per wear than the cheap ones ever did. So I started thinking in cost per use instead of sticker price. For the things I use daily, a mattress, a work bag, good shoes, a decent kitchen knife, I'd buy real quality once and then keep it for years without a second thought. Think about a good pair of boots that cost $200 and last 5 years against a $40 pair you replace twice a year. Over those same 5 years, the cheap ones quietly cost you $400 and a closet full of regret, while the good ones cost less and felt better the entire time. For the things I barely touched, I went cheap or used and didn't agonize over it for a second. The mistake I watched people make again and again was doing it perfectly backwards, spending big on the things they barely used and going cheap on the things their hands touched 100 times a day. The receipt is only ever the first cost. The real cost is how many times you're forced to pay it again. Number 19. Track one number, not 100. I tried real budgeting in my early 20s, the kind with 40 color-coded categories and a spreadsheet that judged me, and I abandoned the whole thing within 2 months, exactly like nearly everyone eventually does. What actually stuck for me was brutally, almost insultingly simple. Once a month, I'd add up everything I owned and subtract everything I owed, and I'd write that one single number down, my net worth. That was the entire system. One number once a month written down where I could see the trend. Not every coffee, not every line item, not a guilt trip over a sandwich. Just the one number that actually tells you the truth about where you stand. And watching it climb, slowly and a little discouragingly at first, then with real visible momentum, became its own quiet kind of motivation. It turned an abstract, fuzzy goal into a scoreboard I checked exactly once a month and then ignored. If I had stuck with detailed budgeting, I'd have quit years ago and never come back. Tracking the one number that genuinely mattered instead of drowning in 100 that didn't is what kept me in the game long enough for compounding to finally show up and do its thing. Number 20. Build a social life that doesn't require a receipt. This is the habit nobody puts on these lists, and it might quietly be the most important of all 20. So much of our spending is really just the price of belonging, the cost of not feeling left out of our own lives. The bottomless group brunches, the dinners where the check gets split evenly and yours was half the tables. The trips you couldn't quite afford but went on anyway because everyone else was going and saying no felt like disappearing. I'm not telling you to become a hermit who never sees daylight. I'm telling you that I slowly, deliberately, over years, built a life where connection simply didn't come with a cover charge. Hikes instead of bars. People over to cook together instead of a $100 dinner downtown. Friends who measured a good night by who showed up, not by what it cost. And here's the part I genuinely did not see coming. That choice didn't shrink my life. It settled it. The constant low pressure to perform a lifestyle I couldn't actually afford just quietly dissolved, and underneath it was something far steadier. Because the real shift, the one that made all 20 of these finally stick for good, was never a trick or a hack. It was the day I stopped trying to look wealthy and started quietly, patiently becoming it instead. So I want to take you all the way back to that moment, the one I opened with. Me, sitting there staring at a banking app, closing it and opening it again because the numbers simply didn't feel real. $200,000 before 30 on an income that never once touched 6 figures, except now you know it wasn't a number that magically appeared one day. It was 20 quiet decisions made over and over and over on 1,000 ordinary days when absolutely nobody was watching or clapping. None of them were dramatic. Any single one of them, taken on its own, would have been almost meaningless. Together, repeated for years until they became who I was, they were the entire thing. And that's the part I most want you to actually hold on to as you go. You do not need a windfall or a perfect salary or a lucky break. You need a small handful of habits you're genuinely willing to keep even when they're boring. Especially when they're boring. Now, if you watched this whole list and felt, somewhere in the back of your mind, like you were missing the foundation underneath all of it, the part that explains why debt and credit and compounding actually behave the way they do, then there's a very natural place for you to go next. I made a complete breakdown of financial literacy that covers exactly that. The things the school system somehow never taught a single one of us. How compound interest quietly works for you instead of grinding away against you. How credit is really scored behind the scenes. How these accounts create advantages that most people never once use. It's the starting point I genuinely wish someone had handed me at 22, and it's the thing that keeps habits like these from slowly turning into expensive mistakes you don't catch for years. Every one of the 20 things you just heard makes far more sense once that foundation is solid underneath you. So before you go start with habit 1, that's the video actually worth watching first, because the habits are what build the wealth. But understanding why is what makes absolutely sure you never give it back.